Hey, Louis here from thelanguagescientist.com, and in today's video I want to talk about how to learn grammar in a foreign language. And so I just want you to imagine a scenario. So let's say, for example, that you go to Japan because you're learning Japanese and you want to perfect your Japanese, and you try to communicate with people, but your Japanese grammar is actually pretty bad, so you don't use the right constructs and you don't put the words in the right order because it's very different from English. Nevertheless, Japanese people actually understand what you're trying to convey overall. And so what I'm trying to say here and illustrate is, it's actually happened to a lot of people, is that it's not necessarily that it's okay to have insufficient knowledge of grammar. What I'm suggesting through this little scenario is that you should focus on really getting your message across, and your grammar will actually improve as you proceed and as you express yourself. This is not necessarily something that is fixed in time. And as a matter of fact, trying to get grammar right from the get-go is a huge source of frustration for a lot of people. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of people actually give up, and they give up learning the language that they're learning, in part because they're frustrated and they feel like they can't get their grammar right, and so they can't express themselves. And so in this video, I'm going to describe various concepts and various techniques that have helped me actually learn multiple languages, like English. This is my second language, like Japanese, as a native French speaker. And this is quite different from, I would say, the classic sort of textbook method where you learn the rules and so on. So first of all, I think we need to understand how much grammar there is to learn in a language, sort of size up what kind of work needs to be done. And so the good news is that all the grammar that you need to know in the majority of foreign languages, and most foreign languages, this is going to fit in a year-long college course, or about 2 years of high school. So why is it that language students, in college or in school, actually spend multiple years learning the grammar of their target language? Well, the grammar that you learn in school actually gets repeated. So you cover the grammar of the language, and then gets repeated with more and more complex sentences. So now I want to talk about a little bit how grammar is organized sort of in the traditional way. And so if you open a language textbook, the grammar is going to be organized along linguistic lines. And so what I'm trying to say is that grammatical concepts will be presented to you in an orderly way that is sort of artificial. But presenting grammar in this order does not really simulate, or it doesn't represent the process, the order in which actual native speakers acquire the grammatical concepts of their language. And so I want to contrast this with another sort of approach, which is the one I'm using, and that as a matter of fact, I would say all successful people who've been successful at learning languages, they all use this approach, which is learning grammar through the ear. And so there are multiple languages like certainly German or Japanese or Chinese where people are absolutely scared of grammar, and yet most of the grammar that you need, 90% of the grammar that you need, is actually very easy to master. So I'd like to suggest that you don't need to fear grammar. And so just like a 3-year-old Japanese baby actually doesn't fear Japanese grammar, as a matter of fact, that baby has no he doesn't know what grammar is. You too can learn the grammar of Japanese or whatever language that you're trying to learn through by ear, and not have to fear it. It sort of is going to become a second sense. So, or a sixth sense rather. So I'm going to describe an experiment performed by Dr. Paul Pimsleur while he was teaching French at UCLA. And this is sort of going to illustrate what I mean by learning grammar through the ear. So Dr. Pimsleur was actually trying to teach students at UCLA French pronouns, which is a hard topic. I wouldn't know, to be honest, because I'm a native French speaker. But to prove the efficacy of this, learning grammar through the ear, the efficacy of this more, oral approach to learning grammar, he actually taught two separate groups. So the first group actually learned the rules. So this is how we learn grammar in school, and for the most part. And so these students, that first group, they attended 6 class periods over the course of a week. Now, the second group of students, the experimental group, worked with tape recordings. So that was back in the days. And so they did a variety of drills, which essentially consisted in listening to and repeating various sentences in French, all containing French pronouns. And so they did this for 2 sessions of 30 minutes each, so a total of 1 hour. And so the two groups were then tested on their ability to say and write sentences with French pronouns. And so the experimental group, the one who had only 1 hour of total training, actually performed slightly better than the first group. And if you think about it, well, slightly better, it's great, but the time investment that was required for the second group, just 1 hour, and in comparison with 6 class periods for the first group, it's really remarkable. So I personally had the same experience, just like the experimental group. Like, you're exposed to so many sentences in a language that you're trying to learn that your ear actually becomes attuned to the patterns of that language. And so you develop this sixth sense of correctness, and you're able to actually say, well, this is correct, this is not, without really knowing exactly what kind of rules are being used. So, I had this experience myself. I actually had to learn English grammar extensively while I was in school, but my sense of correctness actually really developed when I started spending a lot of time listening to how English was, spoken by native speakers. So, how do you do this on your own? How do you apply this to learn, grammar on your own? You can use a similar process to the one I have described, the one that Dr. Paul Pimsleur used with his students. So I'll describe sort of the global guidelines here. And according to Dr. Paul Pimsleur, the best arrangement for learning, grammatical rules or pretty much anything is: number 1, you have a challenge; number 2, you let the student respond; and number 3, the student has to get some sort of response. What is correct? So, in other words, what you're doing is that there is a cue, then a pause, and then there needs to be a response. So, for example, if you're trying to learn French and you want to learn about pronouns in French, you could have a bunch of sentences in French, listen to them using the following sequence. You have the English translation of that sentence in French, then you have a pause, and you have to give the translation of that sentence in French. So for example, if I want to learn the sentence "Je mange une pomme," I eat an apple, then I would say, I would have like an audio tape, well, not a tape, but like some sort of audio program telling me, how do you say "I eat an apple" in French? There's a pause, giving you enough time to respond, and then you say, whatever you remember. And then the correct version in French is going to be played out to you, like "Je mange une pomme." So this is a basic format here. It's very, very basic, and it's very, very effective. So where exactly can you find those sentences? Well, you can just use textbooks. If you're learning French, get a French textbook, and you can take the sentences in that French textbook. And as far as using audio, I actually created a tool called Fluent Falcon, which allows users to create audio drills just like the ones I have described. It's inspired, in fact, by the Paul Pimsleur method. So Fluent Falcon is a tool, and I invite you to go to fluentfalcon.com. It allows you to create audio learning sessions for whatever language you're trying to learn. I have limited the number of languages. There are a few languages that are not available, but for the most part, the most common languages are going to be available. So those learning sessions are going to be created from sentences that you input into Fluent Falcon. So I encourage you to take a look at fluentfalcon.com, and if that's something that you'd be interested in, then you're going to be essentially learning with the Pimsleur method, using your own sentences and using audio learning sessions. So doing these pattern drills is extremely useful for learning grammar, and so learning vocabulary too, for that matter. To be honest, you're going to be acquiring a lot of vocabulary. So a lot of language teachers are actually aware of the effectiveness of this method, but programming these kinds of patterns can be very tedious. It's very hard to do, generate those audio sessions, very, very hard. But Fluent Falcon allows you to do that in a seamless way. It's pretty easy. So you can go to fluentfalcon.com, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.